Good morning, everybody. We are live from beautiful Palo Alto today. This is Scott Dillon. I'm joined by Elijah Martinez. We are in the head office for SAP here at Palo Alto. So it's blue sky overlooking the Bay Area. It's absolutely amazing. No better day than today to talk about API management. So we're just going to just give people a 1 or 2 minutes to join. A couple of things as we get into this. Number one, we will be doing kind of a walkthrough today. So if you want to follow us along the walkthrough, while we're doing, because everybody knows the format, or you should be starting to know now, the format is pretty simple, right? It's 7 minutes with Elijah introducing the topic. And then we have a 25, 30-minute demo walkthrough. We'll show you some real software in the spirit of keeping it real, making it real. And then we'll have some Q&A. So, but for this scenario today, we will be using the trial account, which if you're a user of SAP Cloud Platform or new to SAP Cloud Platform, it's available to everyone. So if you want to follow along with us, I would suggest prior to us getting into the demo in about 10 or 15 minutes, hop into your trial account and enable the API management service if it's not already. And then we're hoping that we'll go slow enough that should you wish to build your first API and watch us through, then that should be possible. The second thing you will need is a user ID and a password on the ES5 system. So for those of you that are familiar with it, well, basically it's a NetWeaver gateway system that's public, and you need to create an account. It'll take all of about 1 or 2 minutes, but you just Google it, ES5 demo system, create yourself a user ID if you don't already have one. And if you already have one, then you're all set. So it's the API management service number 1 and the ES5 account number 2. So let's just see how we're doing on the attendee list. Here, we're doing pretty good. The list is growing. People are just straggling in there, which is great. Let's see. It's always good to see the different folks that are coming in. We got some folks from Ottawa, some folks from Toyota, some folks from Convergent. This is awesome. So I guess we'll give it one more minute. The other thing is there's a group chat item with this on-demand software that's on the bottom. That's not by default showing up. So if you want to communicate with us during the session today, which we're going to start in 1 minute, the two options. One, you submit a Q&A through the Q&A box at the bottom. So you'll submit a question. Nobody else will see it until we have one of the people on our team answer it, and or put something in the group chat box, which we'll see, and we have someone monitoring the whole time. So like at the moment, I got us, just chatting with one of the guys in the chat bot there in the group chat, but that's the way it is. So we're going to get started. So what we're going to do, again, the format is very, very simple and straightforward. I'm going to set a timer because my friend here, Elijah, likes to talk, and he's extremely knowledgeable in API management, but he only gets 7 minutes. So we're gonna lock him down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this first slide, which I think everybody can see now. And we're going to jump right in with a 7-minute overview of API management. Are you ready?
Sure. It's a challenge, right?
All right, 7 minutes. Here we go. We got 7 minutes on the timer.
All right. So the first thing we're going to do is introduce ourselves. So if we go to slide 2 here.
Absolutely. Let's do that.
As we mentioned, Scott Dillon. Yep, the push audience. Scott Dillon, good friend here from the Cloud Platform Center of Excellence. Myself, Elijah Martinez from the Cloud Platform Product Management Group, doing the API platform. And our good friend Derek, who's helping us running, and he's part of the Senior Solutions Architect Group. So a lot of good, intelligent folks, excluding me.
Not true, not true.
Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to actually start off with a little getting to know you question. So you should see a poll question popping up asking you to please describe your knowledge and experience with SAP Cloud Platform, just to give us a little flavoring of where you're at the moment. Are you very familiar? Are you sort of learning about it, or have you never ever seen it before and we're just talking mumbo jumbo?
Yeah, so we're going to give you 30 seconds. So during these 30 seconds, we need to dance a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But I don't know if we want to really dance. But
No, I'm not a dancer.
we'll pause on that. But basically, we just want to just get an idea of where you are. And so as we get into these more and more, obviously, maybe we'll change the poll question because we're hoping to build a bit of a following around the In the Garage series. So this is great. And I do see a few repeat people from the first one. So this is amazing. So, okay, so we're going to just pop over to the poll audience. So you can see now we've got some people coming in there. I'm very familiar, 16%. We are using some cloud platform features, 27. Aware of some features but haven't used it, 40, and not very familiar. So that gives us gives us an idea, right, of what's going on there. So I wonder.
Nobody said what is cloud platform, so that's good.
Right, exactly. So this is good. All right, so first things first, what is an API?
So let's get started. So now that we know what you are like, let's give you some more information. So we wanted to start with the question, what's an API? Because surprisingly to me, there's still quite a few people out there who don't actually know what an API is. There may be some of you, again, who are semi-familiar and some who are very advanced. So just to get a level set, I am a very nerdy person. I love, Star Trek, Star Wars, sci-fi stuff. So when I think about what an API is, I think of it in terms of space technology. So for me, I wanted to make an analogy of space travel. So imagine you're in your own spaceship, you know everything about your spaceship and how it runs and how you're flying around the galaxy. But at some point, you probably are running low on oxygen or food or something in your spaceship, and you need to make a trade with another spaceship. Now, while you're flying around in space, you can't just open the door because then the vacuum comes to die. So you need to have some way of interacting with another spaceship. And you don't want to know everything about every other spaceship in the universe in order to interact with them. So you want to have a way of communicating with that spaceship. So you need something like a simple bridge that every spaceship is equipped with that can just simply connect between the two spaceships. And that would be something like an API, right? So you have your machine, your company, you know everything about how you run, but you want to be able to access and have communications with an arbitrary user, consumer out in the world. And that's how you would be able to communicate with them via a very simple, very basic communications like an API.
So basically, we're exposing a very small part of the spaceship, and the person that would be using the bridge has no knowledge of the rest of the spaceship. So they can't get access to the kitchen to steal the food.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
All right, so let's move on.
Hopefully the nerds can appreciate that. So that's my little picture of a bridge.
Bridge, beautiful.
And that's the API. Great. So then you say, well, okay, what's the big deal about these APIs? It's just, you're just opening up the door, right? But in fact, you'll see that the industry leaders and analysts are already saying that APIs are really a big deal. So IDC says that by 2019, APIs will be the primary mechanism to connect data, algorithms, and decision services. So you can imagine this is more than just opening up your ERP. This is working with IoT and AI and all the good, fun buzzwords that are coming up these days. And even Gartner says APIs are the heart of digital business, and APIs minimize the friction caused by bimodal IT. And that's the idea of the big investment, run your business, and the agile, fast, get things going in innovation side. So APIs are really a big deal. So today we kind of interact with folks and we see, at least I see two customer types. One is the type that is really all in, and this is kind of what I see as the crafting and executing an enterprise API strategy. So they're all in on APIs, they're ready to get going with them, and they're really just looking for a vendor to help them get that API strategy moving. And then we see the customer who has been using APIs on more of an ad hoc basis. So they have projects, people are asking them for things, get going, doing this and that, and it just kind of came up as they went, and everything was on a one-off basis. And both of them, in fact, ended up sort of coming to the same conclusion that API management is really the way to make this a usable and realistic thing going forward. So, generalizing APIs, making them consistent, making them accessible and understandable, as well as making them discoverable. So that's why API management really plays a heavy part in both API strategies that we see. So you might say, well, great, what is API management? It's a simple and powerful tool for really making this API a reality in your enterprise. So very broad strokes. I wanted to make this a sort of simple and consumable talk. So these are kind of the 5 big areas that API management works in. So it works as a discovery, as that central catalog that I talked about for all APIs across your business. And that's actually more important than a lot of people think, because you build an API and you make it do a lot of cool stuff, but nobody knows about it, so nobody can use it, right? So you need to have one place that everyone knows to go to find all the APIs.
Best kept secret.
Best kept secret.
We got an API, but nobody can find it.
Exactly.
Right.
And we hear that a lot.
Perfect.
You'll notice the next one, I did this on purpose. Every icon is colored except for documentation. And I did that on purpose because everyone hates documentation. But everyone also hates something that has no documentation. Would you imagine buying any product in the world that you've not used before that had no documentation? You open the box and you're like, what the hell is this? Right. So everybody needs documentation. And your developers, your consumers, they're going to need to know how to use this amazing thing that you've created to get that value out of it. Then onboarding, right? Onboarding is usually a very painful process. You do a lot of time figuring out contracts and doing all this stuff. So simplifying the way that people can come on and even doing self-service registration is a very powerful part of API management. Then you want to productize your APIs. That means not just having a single API doing one thing, but having a bundle of APIs that do an actual service level thing from your business. So you can imagine making a product from a service catalog, right? You know, you need to be able to consume, understand where the products are, buy them, sell them, return them. So these would be a list of APIs all together as part of a product offering. And then, of course, one of the most important and last things is understanding that usage. You can't drive any kind of success in an API program without understanding how those APIs are being used. And so there you need the insights and reporting on that API level. So then the one more level in, if we drive to the next slide, we would say, what is API management doing for your business? So it's really offloading a lot of that work that you have to do on an IT level. So it's handling for you security, say using API keys to authenticate applications, doing threat protection, sanitizing the data inputs, traffic management, controlling how much traffic's hitting the backend that you're exposing via these APIs, putting quotas, selling a certain amount of usage per time, things like that. Caching is one of the most surprising for people capabilities that actually benefits them a lot. So offloading some of that data from the backend into the cloud so it serves faster and more quickly, or reducing like the number of calculations, for example. Say you're offering an API that has to do some robust calculations from the backend, and then you can just take that result and cache that in the cloud. And of course, you can, flush the cache and start fresh for things. You don't have to only have stale data that would not be benefiting your users. Transformation. So, say for example, you want to take data and make it mobile ready, which is different than using a desktop. You can actually remove unnecessary data elements in order to make it really more mobile consumable and cleanse the data, remove different parts. And then, of course, we talked about analytics. Understanding how your APIs are being used is very important. So then I'll just quickly talk through this. One of the benefits of this is that you can shrink the things that you don't want to spend your time on, and you can grow the things that you really want your business to expand in. So you can see like TCO, how fast a developer gets going with it, how fast you actually make that API. Those are the things you want to shrink. And then your business insights, exposure to the world, how many people are using your APIs internally or externally, those are things you want to grow. Great. So how does this actually work? So this is actually a middle piece. So it's going to sit in between the consumers who want these fast-paced digital applications to be updated regularly and all the time, and your back-end API providers, which are going to be your core business systems that you don't want to have to plunk around with all the time, because that is expensive and takes a lot of time. So if we click the little button, we'll see in the middle, API management is that layer which allows that agility and it allows you to not have to reinvest your information. So that's kind of a big high-level view of API management, why APIs are important, and what it's providing for you. So
it's beautiful. Now we do have the another quick poll here. So the question is, we didn't reveal this to you, but one of the questions that I get asked quite a bit is, is SAP publishing APIs? So there is this notion of the API hub. So we want to just quick poll question. Oh, that's our timer. Let's get that canceled. So that's Elijah. In 7 minutes, did pretty well. Just have a quick look at that poll and see what you think here, based on what you know today. Like, are we offering a few APIs, a lot? What do you think is the idea here? And just one other note, just before we continue now with the demo portion. We do have the group chat open. We're having a look. I don't see any questions coming in there, but based on that 7-minute overview, does anybody have any questions that you want to throw in there quickly that either Derek or myself or Elijah will deal with? Throw them in the group chat window or in the official Q&A box, and we can take a look at that right away.
So that's a good way of avoiding the dance. Just give people a little information that they can run with.
Exactly, exactly. So we got some people, I think we got 0 to 10. We got 10 to 50, 50 to 75 at 12%, 75 to 150, 150 to 500, and then 500 plus. And so this is it's really interesting because most people think that we'd have over 500 plus. And to me, like, when we talk to people all the time, they're like, hey, SAP, why would I consider working with SAP and SAP Cloud Platform for APIs? And I said, well, it's kind of like buying a DVD player without any content, right? So you come to SAP and you say, yeah, we've got an amazing DVD player, but guess what? We've got 400 million lines of business process code behind it, and being able to take any one of those processes and expose it as an API is a powerful thing. Anyway, so one of the pieces of feedback we got last time, and I do see there's a couple of questions coming in there now. I'll let Derek take a shot at those. And if he doesn't get those answered towards the end, we'll pop in there and have a look at them as well. But one of the things that we were commented on last time is that we didn't give a description of the demo. So we're going to do that just quickly now. So you'll see as part of the demo, we have 2 personas that we're going to run through. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to be hands on the keyboard. And, the mechanic in the garage today is Elijah, and he's going to walk me through start to finish creating our first API. And so there are 2 personas. There's the developer, the API administrator persona, the person that will expose a service from SAP, an SAP backend. In this case, we'll use ES5. We debated using a non-SAP source, but I think a lot of the people that join the call are SAP, and one of their first questions is, well, how do I take an existing service, maybe that's already exposed on the gateway system, and make it an API? So we're going to run through that, and then we'll switch hats, and we'll clearly delineate the switch to be the developer, i.e. a developer, internal and or external, that would then go through the steps of kind of subscribing to that API. So you can see there's basically 3 steps in the API administrator piece. There's the creating the API proxy, and then I should have put my glasses on, applying the policies, and then creating a product. And basically the notion of a product, which is an interesting name, I never really understood the notion of the name, but the idea of the name for me anyway is a way to group the APIs that we want to then expose. So if we wanted to have a product maybe for a customer, or then another product for ABC, we can basically use that as a container to put the APIs in. Would that be a good description?
Yes, and just to quickly answer your question, the intention of product is that we want you to think of APIs as products. So like you would be developing a software product, we want you to approach your API journey with APIs being thought of as products, because you will be exposing them, you will be marketing them, and you will be potentially selling them like you would any other product.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so without further ado, let's pop in there. So for anybody that wants to follow along, Derek, I see there's a bunch of questions now that are floating in there, Derek, so you can take a look at that, and we'll come back to it at the end. But for those of you that are following along, again, we're going to pop right in now to the cloud platform cockpit, and we will go through the process of start to finish and explain pretty much everything. And we're good on time wise. We're 20 after 10, so we can take our time. It'll probably be about 25, 30 minutes. But actually, I think I probably should hit the screen share. Otherwise, they won't see.
Otherwise, it's just for us.
Perfect. So let's share this, and then maybe as long as you folks can see the screen, Kiri and or anybody else that's in there, just send me a quick note to let me know that you can see the screen, but I'm going to assume you can. So I'm going to back out here at the very entry point. Just going to refresh my screen.
And maybe it's worth telling people the URL, account.hanatrial.ondemand.com is the entry point.
That's a good point. Probably. Yeah, so again, account.hanatrial.ondemand.com, so you can notice at the top here, log in there, and then, so once you get logged in, you can just basically log into your account. We'll click on that, and then we're going to walk you through start to finish.
One quick reminder.
Sure.
If you do log in and this is your first time, you'll see two options, Cloud Foundry and Neo. We will be working in the Neo environment.
Right. Perfect. And then down, we don't have time to go through everything in here, but if it's, hopefully it's not your first time in, but down the left-hand side, there's a bunch of different categories where you get access to the services in SAP Cloud Platform. On the left, there's one called Services. So I'm going to click on that one, and it's going to show me all the services that are available inside. So I could scroll down and kind of, find it here on the screen, API management. But another option would be I could just type in API over here. So I could find API, and then it's going to narrow it down for me, API management. Now you can see that mine is already, just click on the enable button. So I'm going to go in there. And then when we go in there, we see it's kind of, if it's your first time, it might be a little bit like, what am I doing here, right? So what about these first two, Elijah? Because really the first two we're not going to use today. We're going to use the second, the third, and the fourth option. But what is this one? API portal and developer portal, what's that about?
Sure. So this is where you as a customer would actually be handling the controls of who gets access to what part of your API management system. So the API portal, roles and destinations, you're going to say who is an administrator, who can actually create these API proxies that we're going to show you, who can make changes to them. You can also potentially create a guest role. So if you need to have someone come in and troubleshoot your environment, but you don't want them to have access to mess around in there, they can come in on a read-only basis, view some of the things that you're looking for help with, and then say, oh, hey, I noticed you didn't do this right or wrong. Gotcha. Same for the developer portal. Although I will caution you that the developer portal, typically you will run through, there's a management function within the developer portal itself. So usually that will be something that will be through the UI, and you won't actually have to do any changes here.
Okay. And then we have these other three options, which is accessing an API portal, access developer portal, and access API designer. Kind of quick 30 seconds on those.
Sure. So Access API Portal is your link to get into the API portal where you do your administration. Access Developer Portal will be the URL you will share to developers to have that discovery of what APIs you're making available to them. And the API Designer is actually a very nice new feature. I saw someone ask about RAML and other specifications. This is where you can actually go ahead and design an API within the API management service using the OpenAPI spec, or you can import WSDL, for example, and you can basically start to design the API within API management and deploy it so it's an API-first approach to API management.
Gotcha, gotcha. So now we're going to start off with, so let's take a look at that.
Perfect. So we're going to pop in here as the administrator. We're going to be greeted by this beautiful dashboard view. So this is kind of your overview of what's happening in your environment. You get to see how much traffic there is, which APIs are running and being used, if there's any slowdowns or errors that you need to address. So it's kind of just your entryway to say what's happening at a glance.
Gotcha. Some useful information here, right? That's
Yes.
the starting point. And then you have a bunch of icons here, right? But I mean, we want to make it bigger. So I'll click on this little hamburger menu option, kind of let us know what the functionality is behind.
Sure. So one thing I did want to mention is that it's not just beautiful, but it's actually accessible. So each one of those tiles will actually be clickable, and you can go into each of those functionalities. So if you wanted a deeper analytics, you could actually click into, say, for example, the API usage and actually see a bigger graph.
Very nice.
And then, as you said, on the left, we have access to a bunch of different areas. So I'll start from the bottom because we're going to be using the top. So the test area is actually a built-in test client. So you can actually access and test out the APIs you've deployed in API management directly from the client. So you don't have to go anywhere else to see what's happening. And you can do different variations like change the URI, change the headers, and it's a pretty robust tool. The analyze is where we talked about in the slides that you need to have those analytics and understanding of what's happening with your APIs. So this is where we provide three main areas. One is a performance view where we provide out-of-the-box charts about how fast your APIs are, which ones are more active, how much traffic you're having per API, et cetera, et cetera. We have an error view where you see if are any having problems. Are you seeing a spike in problems? Do you need to address a 404 error, a 423 error, things like that? And then the last one is actually a custom view where you can create your own metrics based on your particular needs and interests, as well as create custom information that you pull out of the API and expose as a chart. So you get a lot of out-of-the-box depth of information, and you can customize yourself. Monetize is the monetization piece that I talked about. If you want to actually produce your API as a monetized product, you can actually build in rate plans for each API and apply them on a product level. And the last two are the ones we're actually going to show you in the demo. So develop is where we're actually going to go in, develop the API proxy, publish it, and make it available for use. And discover is actually how API management can connect directly to API Hub, pull in APIs from the SAP portfolio, as well as pull in these policy templates, which we'll show you during the demo.
Okay, cool. So,
so
the goal, so just again, the goal today, what we're going to run through here now, so there's a couple of prerequisites, right? So the prerequisite, number one, is you have a user account, but overall, if we kind of move up a little bit, the prerequisite for API proxy is that we have a service that sits in a back end that's already been developed and it's already it's already in use, right, more or less. So today the assumption is, yep, someone's gone ahead and developed some services inside the gateway, and these gateway services have been exposed, some REST OData services. So that's the prerequisite. So on the company side, that would be in place, and then someone says, hey, how long would it take me to take one of those that already exists and create an API? So if everything goes well today and the demo gods are good to us, we should be able to get this done in about 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Should. Okay, so let's do it. So we got to go to develop.
Sure. And it'll be a little slower because we'll actually be talking about it. You as a person will not actually have to talk it out.
Right, exactly. So obviously I've been in here playing around. I just did a 3-day workshop with some of our other colleagues the last couple of days. We were in here playing around, but now we want to create something brand new. So I'm not a genius, but I'm thinking this create button might be a good place to start.
Yep, it's highlighted, it's blue, it's drawing your eye.
All right. So one thing that if anybody's trying to follow along with us, you will need to have this URL. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it up on the screen for you. We'll leave it here. We'll talk through this. We'll put it there. But basically, this is a link that we grabbed from the ES5 system. And when you invoke this link in a web browser just on its own, you will see it brings back basically a definition of the resources that have been exposed from ES5. So we'll just leave that there for maybe 30 or 40 seconds more while we describe what this box is, which we're not using today.
Okay.
What's an API provider?
Sure. So an API provider is basically the same as this URL. It's a link for API management to connect directly to the base URL there of a system. And you can use that for a couple of things. If it's an SAP system, for example, you'll actually get a Discover button, which will actually connect API management into a service catalog of all the APIs that are there. And then you can actually just select the API that's being exposed rather than having to know the URL directly. Or if you have a non-SAP system, you can use that to, for example, connect to the OData metadata, which would usually require some authentication. And then you would paste in the URL relative to that system. And they would then pull the metadata and automatically generate the resources that Scott just talked about in the API proxy.
Okay, so two really important points there that I want to touch on because I get asked this all the time. So what you're saying, Elijah, and I just to confirm it because sometimes I tell people like, no, that can't be true. The API management tool can be used with non-SAP backends.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, that's number one. And then number two, when you select SAP, if I were to select an SAP provider, I won't do it because I've already got the URL in there and I want people to have the opportunity to write it down. But if we selected SAP, this Discover button gives you insight into services that are already there. So it's not like I've got to jump over into the gateway system to find them. It's going to populate right with a list. And then when I pick it, that's pretty much it.
That's it.
So services in the back, we click, we select, we basically selected our service, and the rest is kind of putting the wrapper and the definition around it. Right?
Exactly.
All right, so let's do that. So let's give it a name.
Sure.
API. Let's say garage.
And this name is just going to be for your personal benefit. This will only be what we see populating your API list so that you know what is this API that I've created. The title is similar. It's going to be something that's going to float out to the developers, but it's also a way of more robustly describing what this API is. And then as you see here, Scott's creating a description. This is part of actually the documentation that we talked about. So here's where you can float up a little more information about what this is. You can start to showcase some links, some documents, and you'll see when we jump into the API Hub, in fact, you're even able to potentially turn this, when you expose this developer portal, as something connected to like an SDK even. So you're really wanting to provide as much information to your developers as possible.
Beautiful.
So here we have a very nice description by Scott. I like it.
So hold on. So just resist the urge, like I did this morning when we were just practicing to hit create at this point, because there's a few little things down below.
There's a little bit more.
So what is this host alias all about?
Yes, and that's a question we get a lot. So host alias is actually going to be what is the URL that a consumer will be hitting in order to get access to your API. So when you actually access this API proxy that we're creating, you'll connect to this URL here, and then it'll be / and then the API base path that we're going to create for this API proxy.
Okay. So...
And this, I do want to mention, is something that you can configure to be customized to yourself, right? So out of the box, we're going to give you on the trial account and a trial URL, but you could make it, dot your company, API dot your company, for example.
Okay. So it's kind of like this. Garage API.
And this is actually part of what a lot of people fight about. We talk about versioning, for example. And one thing we like to recommend, in fact, is that you make a very non-opaque versioning. So right now for this demo, we're just going to say Garage API and be very clear about it.
Okay.
But by specifying in your base path, you can actually say something like /rest /v1 /Garage API. And then your developers say, I know this is the V1 version.
I see.
To version it, you just simply need to make a new version with /v2. And now your developer can know the versions very quickly and easily. And it's very simple.
Interesting. And so then also we have this service type here. It's a little bit confusing to me because it has OData and REST, and kind of OData is the format, at least that's the way that I think of it. OData is the format with all the metadata, and then REST is the protocol, but we kind of mix and match them here. And OData is not actually selectable, but we do support OData, right?
Yes. So OData is what we call RESTful. So it means that it complies to the overarching REST format, like you mentioned, the protocol. But it actually has some additional features to it. Like you said, the metadata, there's a particular hierarchical format to it. So there's a lot of specific things to OData. So that's why we pulled it out of REST. And as you mentioned, it's not selectable. And that is specifically because we didn't provide an API provider. So as I mentioned, in order to utilize that metadata, you have to make a request to the backend and say, please give me the metadata. And usually that means you need to authorize yourself and authenticate yourself against that backend.
Gotcha.
So that's why, again, you need the API provider, which gives you those credentials for API management to pull that metadata.
One thing I also recognize in the past is that if you have a service defined in the back end, and if you've been a good SAP customer and you have your service documented in the back end, that will come forward.
Yes.
So that becomes part of the API documentation. So if you've done it right in the back, quote unquote, right, then that will flow through. So your time required to create the documentation here is less.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, so I guess I can hit create. There's nothing else left to.
You got it. You fill it all out.
It's done. All right, so we've got our first screen here.
So we have our first screen, and here's where we really start to have control over the API. You see that all this good stuff has been floated up from our create screen. All the documentation that we saw before is there already, and as well as the information that we provided. But now we can actually do some enhancement to this API proxy. Right now, it's just pretty empty. So we talked about that this is just pointing right now to this ES5 OData API that you talked about, and you said it accesses all these resources. So one thing we might want to do is put some fine-grained controls on this API proxy. Say, for example, we want to control how much access someone has to one of those resources you talked about.
Right.
So let's go to the resource area. Right now, it's just whatever resources there is accessible, and we're going to actually create a resource control. So we already know a little bit about this API. We know that it has a list of products, and we're going to say, let's make that read-only. So we're going to give it a title products. We're going to link now to the path prefix to that particular resource, which is product set.
Is it slash at the beginning?
Yeah, / product set. And this will be case sensitive because we're going to check against that particular resource.
Right. And so just so for people that are watching, the reason why it's product set will become immediately obvious in about 2 minutes, right? Because that is defined in that OData source. So when you bring it back, you see it called out there, product set. But what's really interesting to me here is that there's a lot of services in SAP, and a lot of them have more than we need, right? So we want to have some way to kind of narrow them down for specific use cases.
Exactly.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the operations that I don't want, because we don't want anybody crazy like yourself going in there, deleting and patching and posting things, right? So we'll really shut this down.
And you might think this is pointless, but I actually just talked to a colleague 2 days ago who was doing QA, and he said in his system, someone deleted all of the data in their entire test and harness, and is not on purpose.
All right, so get all the products. and ECC. Cool. Slash. All right.
And I think you had asked me a little bit before, okay, I just removed all these operations, but can I add one if I needed?
Right, exactly.
So, yes,
so whoops, I made a mistake. We can just put this back in. Oh, no, I made a mistake again. Take it out.
Exactly.
So we're going to go with that one.
Awesome.
All right.
So now you see that we have this operation. And, going back to that protocol question about RAML or other specifications, all APIs here are going to be exposed in the OpenAPI/Swagger format. So you'll see now this is actually being exposed as you would see in a normal Swagger document. And if you click the get, you'll see a little bit of information floated up. And again, we didn't infer or introduce any of this. This was all done automatically out of the OpenAPI spec. You can edit it and add more, but this is sort of out of the box.
And there's my little description.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, that's neat.
Awesome. So let's just go ahead and deploy this now. So we've been doing everything in the design time. So no one's been able to access this. So now let's put it out on the internet and make it available. So now you see we have this API proxy URL.
Right
so
here.
you click it, yep. You'll see, voila, like magic, we're actually connecting to the actual backend.
Okay, so let's give this a shot. I'm glad that it's hashed out because, it's a good thing.
And API management isn't taking those credentials. It's actually floating up that request from the backend, and it's just passing it opaquely. So it doesn't know your credentials. And now we see our resources, and there's the product set.
Product set, right? We could have easily put in business partner set or any of the other ones that were there. We could do those, add them back in. And we're basically zooming in on a slice of the resources that this thing exposes, right? Which makes a lot of sense, right? Because you want to have it just to be able to control the pieces that come down. Okay, yeah, exactly. This is great. All right. So let's pop back here.
Great. So now we've basically just made a literal proxy, right? It's a pass-through. You click on this URL and it sends you to the information of the backend. You've opaqued the backend name by having it be run through API management, but we haven't really done anything yet. So you might say, well, so what? That didn't do anything.
So what? It didn't really do anything, Elijah.
Yes, good point, Scott. So let's make it do something.
All right.
So let's do what we call policy, and these are the heart of API management, where you're actually doing some controls. Now, I know you're tempted to click policies.
I want to click it right here, right now.
It's right there, but I want to show you something very cool. So let's actually go to the API hub by clicking the Discover button.
All right, so we're going to jump. We're right in the middle of developing our API, and we're going to jump now to the API hub.
Yes.
What exactly is the API hub? Before I click the button, because it's pretty easy for me to click this button here, and yes, we're gonna drop over into something else.
Yeah, look,
but for anybody that looks at this, it does say API portal. It doesn't say API hub.
Yes. So the nicety of that is that we haven't actually left API management. We're still in API management. We're just accessing the API hub through API management.
Okay.
So you will see the same thing that you would see if you went to the API hub, except for the fact that now we're linking all the resources there directly to API management rather than having to like export or download or do any of that stuff.
Okay.
So you said, what is the API hub? Great question. The API hub is SAP's exposure of all their APIs, API management policies and proxies, as well as integration content for our cloud platform integration. So this is really, if you'll excuse the term, SAP's developer portal. So this is how we are managing exposing APIs to people to consume. And actually, for me, it actually literally is a developer portal. So underneath, API management actually is running under the covers.
Okay. And
it's exposing the APIs, rate limiting them. So it's actually our first public exposure of API management.
Very nice. Now, so just to relate it back to our first, in the garage session, we did integration services, and the big push there, what I thought was really valuable, which is why we did that first session the way we did, is we showed people how there was content in the exposed through API Hub as part of this mediated content, and we took that content, basically made a copy, we deployed it, and we ran it. So it was pretty quick. So now we're going to do something similar, right? We're going to pop in here. I think the one we're going to basically pop over to all, so we can see all content, and we're going to do a search in here, right, for something?
Right. So you'll see already there's a list of APIs and information that you could pull in, but we're going to look specifically for a API policy template. This is where we as SAP have bundled a bunch of security best practice APIs. Okay. So let's go ahead and click in there. So we try to make this as easy for people as possible.
Right.
And you'll see under artifacts, if you click the sub-tab there, there's a bunch of security policies that we give you out of the box. And if you scroll down, you'll see this very simple one, verify API key by query parameter. So let's go ahead on the far right. We could jump into it, but for sake of time, I think we'll skip that part. And we'll click under the actions. We'll click copy. So as I said, this is your API management connection to API Hub, and this is personalized to you. So now that we've copied it, it's gone right into your environment.
Right, because it says copied. It's kind of like it copies it to the clipboard, but you don't really know where it goes. So I'm glad that we're going through this, because for the uninitiated, you think, okay, I'm great, I'm copying it, but you know, where
did it go?
Where does it go? It's like kind of a mystery, right?
Yeah, well, let's find out.
Let's find out. All right, so we got to
we'll
go back now?
Back to develop. Yep.
All right.
So this is where we do our actual development. Now you'll see the policy templates in the far right. And now we have one policy template, and aha, it's the verify API key by query parameter.
What a coincidence.
What a coincidence.
Okay, cool.
So now this policy template is available for you to use and reuse over and over with every API proxy you make.
Okay.
So let's go back to the API proxy we just made. So let's click into Garage API.
Okay.
Let's click into policies.
Back up here.
Yep. And now we're actually going to edit this API. So right now we're in view only mode. So all we can do is see stuff. And we're actually going to click edit to make some changes.
Beautiful.
So now you see there's a policy template button. Let's click that. And let's apply. So now we can apply these policy templates that we have available to us. So you can just select it. You can select more than one and click apply. Now you'll see on the far left.
Because nothing happened here.
Nothing happened because we haven't selected anything. So on the far left, you'll see these flows. And this is where you actually are applying these API policies. So let's click on the pre-flow.
Because this is new.
Yes.
Because before we hit that, it was a zero.
Zero, exactly.
So we know something's happened. It just didn't happen with this initial screen.
Exactly.
So we're going to click the pre-flow. Okay.
And so now you see you have a check API key policy. And I think it's fair to take 1 minute, and I know you hate me taking time, to explain.
15 minutes left, but I think it's good time. It's time well spent.
Yes, to explain a little bit about why we have these flows and why, like you said, why didn't this appear for us? So we've actually broken up where you can apply these policies into 4 major areas. And this allows you to have really fine-grained controls about when something activates and under what conditions. So we actually have 2 main areas. There's the incoming request and the outgoing response. So you can see in our little screen here, there's a little person and there's a little computer and there's some arrows. So that's part of the incoming request. So it says the person makes a request to API management. So it's coming in.
Right.
Now API management is going to do something before it even sends that request back to the backend. So here with the API.
So this would be, just to cut you off there, hold on a second. So this would be a person, we decide that we're going to build an application for someone to view products with our API. This person is holding a mobile phone that's running UI5 on it, and that UI5 app is making a call to the back to check or to get that, to access that API. And prior to it being received, we can inject something there.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
And so that's where the check happens. And if they don't have the right key, if they're a fake app or something else, we just say, nope, you're not valid. And the backend has no idea that a request even ever was made.
I see.
And
so
only
this is this isolation concept.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
And then same thing can be done on the outgoing response. Let's say the backend sends you a bunch of information for your Fiori mobile app. And you say, whoa, that's too much, right? This is going to take forever for it to process. I'm going to strip out 50% of this stuff that mobile doesn't care about and really streamline this just for my nice Fiori mobile app.
Interesting.
And that's part of the outgoing. Now there's 2 more parts to that. So there's proxy endpoint, there's target endpoint. So you can say, what am I doing from the user requesting to API management? And what am I doing from API management going to or from the backend? So that's why I said there's 4. So it's 2 and then 2.
Gotcha.
And we can maybe go into pre-flow, post-flow later. That's going to be a lot of stuff.
Definitely later.
No. Definitely later. So for right now, we're just going to do stuff in the pre-flow, so that means before everything else, and in the incoming request stream.
Okay.
So we've done the check API key, but let's protect our backend even more.
But hold on a second. So, but just down here, when we added this policy, we do have this little bit of script. I won't call it code because it's really just declarative type. You know, you're declaring a property here, API key references, and it has this API key referenced here, which is request.queryparam.api key. What's going on here?
Sure. So this is basically telling API management, when you process this step, where do you look for the API key to be supplied, right? So like we talked about, the Fiori mobile app has to somewhere provide this API key.
Got it.
And here we're just saying, look in the standard HTTP request query parameter. So this is basically the URL that is passing. And somewhere in that, it's going to specify, hey, here's my API key value. And you'll see that when we go through the demo.
Perfect.
But you could put it somewhere like the header, which is usually more secure. This is mostly just for demo purposes. And then, it's basically just where do I look for this?
All right, so let's do the next one.
Cool.
Then
So now let's go to traffic management. So we talked about these a little bit in the slides of, we have these various areas. And so in the traffic management area, we're going to add a quota.
Okay.
And you just click the little plus button. Since we've already selected the preflow, it knows to attach it there. And we're just going to give it a name. You can say it's going to preflow, incoming request. And now you see that this happens in serial, right? First, you check the API key. If it's valid, then you say, have you already used up the quota we've assigned? If not, then you pass it on to the backend.
All right.
And you'll see, again, a little bit more of this scripting, as you say. It's currently set to allow 2 requests per, and if you scroll down, 1, and I think it's unfortunately under this sharing window.
I think it's
there we go,
here.
per minute. And you can define every one of these however you want. Make it
cool.
1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000, 1 billion per day, per month, whatever you want.
Okay.
Okay, great. So I think that's enough for now.
That's it, right? That's all we got to do.
Time. Yep.
So I guess just while I'm hitting update here, I guess what's important for me is that people can take a service from SAP, and it might not be perfect the way that it is, but you have the ability to put these controls in front that could limit the access, could reduce the amount of data coming back, a lot of different things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we had an update and we have a save.
Yes.
Do you want to, why do we have 2 buttons that essentially, for me, do the same thing? Is that true or not true?
Update is specific to the policies, so that's only when you're making policy changes. Do you want to update? Do you want to change? Save is if you were doing multi-steps, right? Are you changing the name, the path, the resources? Do you want to save the fullness of it? And only when you click save are you deploying all of your changes to the runtime.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's essentially publishing out this API. So until you click save, the API will be still running in the background, that people can still access it, and the changes won't propagate until you click save.
Okay.
So as an example, why don't we go to our URL that we had before?
Which is...
Yeah, you can just click that. And now we see immediately in the real time, we made this update, and aha, now we have no API key. So let's really quickly make an API key for us to get access to that data.
Yeah, exactly. Let's...
time is running out.
So we got to go back now.
No, not yet.
Okay, sorry.
Now we make the product. So this is how we would expose it to our developers. So right now, this API would be only accessible to folks if we gave them the URL.
Okay.
So we're going to make a product, which will be how we bundle up APIs in a productized way and expose it to the developers to be discoverable in the developer portal.
Okay.
So just like before, we're going to go quickly through this because it's pretty much the same process. We're going to click the cool create blue button.
Okay.
We're going to give it a name. We're going to give it a title. And we'll just make it very simple, call it garage product. And again, these are just for understanding what this product is. So you can make it whatever you want.
I'm not very creative, as you can see.
And we'll click APIs. And we'll add. And it's called APIs because you can add as many as you want. In this case, we're just going to select this one that we just created.
Because it's likely we would have more than one API for a product, right?
Yes, usually, yes. But just for demo purposes, we're just adding this one. And we're going to publish.
All right.
So just like before, this was never visible until we click that button, and now it's available right away, and we'll see that. So let's go back to our Cloud Platform Cockpit.
Now, before we do that, just a quick second over here.
Sure.
So we've got some Q&As that have been stockpiling here. So I think there's a few of them that are in there, but just in general, we've got other tools available to help you design your APIs with great granularity. Are the tools available to help you design your APIs with the right granularity so you don't need to redesign them?
So I would say that's part of what we were showcasing just now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are so many API design and manuals out there. Why SAP API management?
Okay.
Yeah, and I think Derek went in there already. So I think some of the things that we already talked about, and we didn't show them because we just ran out of time, but in terms of being able to integrate with SAP, grab the services, bring them back, the integration with the API hub, I think we've shown a few of those things already.
And again, I think I think you're good, yeah.
Yeah, and then can it connect to Snowflake Cloud Data Warehouse? I'm not familiar with Snowflake Cloud Data Warehouse, but I think really the question is, what does it provide as a protocol on its side? Exactly. So if it does provide a REST or a SOAP interface, then yes, we can connect to it, right?
Exactly.
All right, we'll just keep going. But then this guy, this is all good. We can technically create services from any NetWeaver app through SOA Manager or create an interface with proxy. I'm just trying to see the screen. It's hard to see here. We're missing a line or two. There are. How do I get that to be bigger? Sorry, folks, I'm just trying to get the screen to be a little bit more visible, but I'm having trouble.
Okay, so he says we technically can create any document.
Okay, which you can share. Okay, so basically he's wondering, look, there's ways that you can create services. There's many ways to create services, essentially, and I think it's related to the other gentleman's question where he's saying, like, why would I use API management compared to, or when would I use API management as compared to the SOA manager, which allows you to go in, create a service, here it is, boom, it's exposed. And so that scenario comes up a lot because people say, look, I've already started with Gateway, I got a bunch of services, but the reality is, unless someone's out there actively documenting those services, you're kind of limited, I think, in what and how far you can take that, right? And so you put this API management layer on top, and this is all things I've heard and learned from you. You put this API management on top, and you have finer grained control over that. And it doesn't have to be programmatic, right? So you can reduce the number of resources that are there. You can reduce the data. You can get the format from OData to JSON as an example. These are all things that you can just do with click, 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 and it's kind of done, right?
Exactly.
But anyway, that gives a little bit of insight. But let's go back just to quickly go through some of those questions. Let's go back to the cockpit because we've got about 8 minutes to try to keep on time here. So we got to be quick. So we're going to go into the developer portal.
So we're putting on our developer hats now.
So basically we want to build an app. We want to build an app, or at least set up ourselves so we can start developing an app to do a product list, right?
Yep.
All right, so right away we see that we have a new product.
It's already there. Awesome.
Coincidence? And it was published 3 minutes ago, so no fake and bake here, right?
Exactly.
In the garage, we're real. Exactly. We're all about keeping it real. So thank God it worked. Demo gods are with us today in this demo system, in this trial environment. So we got we got this garage product, and if I click on it, I can basically see the description that I put in there allows us developers to retrieve a list of products. So now what?
So now we're going to actually get the API keys. So let's subscribe to this. So we say, great, this product's got all the stuff I want. Okay. I want to go ahead and make an app on it. So let's subscribe.
So it looks like I can use an existing app if I have one, or I can create a new one. So let's create a new one.
So we're going to create a new application. And here, the application we talk about in the API key will be for your analytics as the administrator. So each application will have its own API key, and then you can really track very finely which applications are using, which APIs, how much traffic they're generating, and really understand, again, what's happening in your system.
Right. Because so two things, a common user comment as well, this application is performing so slow. So you could basically then, if you had your app attached to 3 or 4 APIs from the cockpit, you could see, these 3 APIs are all sub-second kind of returns. And then this other, API that's going to our competitor technology might take 15 or 20 seconds, right? Yeah, exactly. It's not HANA enabled, so therefore it's going to take longer. So so we can see that visually pretty quickly. But then what is this thing, this callback URL? What's that about?
So callback URL is if you're doing a 3-legged OAuth situation. So this is about how your application would authenticate against that. So it would basically call back to another service, get that token handling going. You're basically specifying how do you reach out from your application. So we're using basic auth. We're very simple people here at the garage, so we don't have to do that right now. It's an optional step.
So we have our API, product story, and then all we got to do is hit save?
That's right. Very easy.
All right, so two-step process.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's go and actually look. So if you expand the hamburger menu, you'll see this consume area. So this is how you as a developer want to go consume. Very quickly, I do want to just point out, this menu is very similar on purpose. So you have test. You can also, as a developer, test your APIs. You have analyze. You see personal analytics. This is just for the applications you've built, not, of course, everybody's. You have monetize. You can see the billing rates for the APIs you subscribe to, and et cetera, et cetera. And then you have consume. And this is where you actually start to get your API keys and understand how to use the API.
Okay.
So let's jump into the application, garage application.
Garage app.
Now you have your API key, which we're going to go ahead and copy.
So I'm just going to take it right from here.
Yep. And you can, of course, regenerate this if, say, for example, it was compromised, or you made a new version of the app and you wanted to invalidate your old version. And then, all the old requests would get an error saying, hey, that's not a valid API key anymore.
All right. So I copied that. Now what?
Now we have this. So let's go back to our request that failed. Yep, that one. So we see, hey, you don't have the API key. So let's go, and we said this is going to be in the URL. So let's just put a question mark. So this is where you're telling, as part of the HTTP standard, I'm now going to put in a query parameter, and we're going to say API key. And I think it's case sensitive, so please make it all.
Yeah, I think that's right there, I think.
Okay, well, we'll find out. We'll find out. This is how you test. This is called fail fast. This is the new world.
Fail often, fail fast.
Exactly. So see, sometimes the API expert knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're just going to make this all lowercase.
Lowercase?
Yeah.
Say API. Whoops, what did I do there?
Yeah, you're okay. You're okay. And K. Perfect. Sometimes the API key.
Man, that's why you're here. That's why you're the mechanic.
But that's a great example, and Scott did this on purpose, that if you provide the API key in the wrong value or you don't provide it in the right methodology, we're not just faking it. You don't provide the right stuff, you don't get access.
You don't get access. No access for you.
Exactly.
It's like that episode of Seinfeld. The soup guy.
Exactly.
All right, but that was the test of the API key,
so
right?
Let's test the quota.
But we also had a quote in there, right?
Yeah, let's refresh a bunch
I'm
of
basically going to hit the refresh button in the browser once. It goes through twice.
Nope, you didn't quite. You have to do it one more time. There you go. Yeah. So they say once, twice, three times lady, but once, twice, three times quota limit exceeded.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And so we saw all those policies that we just applied, and they came on in real time, and they're all working just like we expected them to.
Awesome. That was really good. So, I mean, basically, just I'll stop sharing the screen. We'll go back to the slides here for 1 minute. And the time we have remaining, 3 minutes. So let's go back to here. First of all, I'll just jump into the Q&A. I don't think we've had any new ones come in. We kind of went through those quickly. So back to maybe, is it, we left off right here, I think? No, here.
No, right there. Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, so
we'll do a quick poll just while we're kind of finished, as we're getting ready to finish up here. Just another quick one to see if you're using APIs today. But in general, start to finish, one we kind of showed was, okay, here's an API administrator. We go out, we create the API, we attach a product to that API, and the product can contain one or more APIs. So we do that as administrator, we publish it. And then on this, and as part of that, we did use a security template that was already published, out of the box content from SAP. So we put that in there, we publish it. And then the second part of it is that we go out as a developer person and we go to the site, which also, we didn't mention this, but it can be branded, right?
Yes.
So you take customer X, they want to put their branding on top, and this could be for internal people and external people. So they go out, they see the products that are available. In order to consume it, they create an application and they subscribe to one or more products. They bring that in, and then they, of course, as soon as they create the application and the association, you get the API key, and then you can use that to call the API. One thing that we didn't have time to show, unfortunately, is that the integration between API management and WebIDE now and UI5, it's gotten much tighter. So now from a WebIDE perspective, when you go in there, you can see the APIs that have been pushed out as products. And when you select them, it'll do the association and the creation of the application to that. And also it'll embed some of the code to include the API key as well, right? So this is a really a nice tight integration as well, which goes back to the gentleman's question, why would I use API management? And I keep telling people, the sum of the parts is greater than the individual parts. So you got to start thinking about how these things all interconnect. But okay, so we got that. We had that poll question. We had some answers here. So yes, people are, supply chain is popular for sure. Operations, HR, finance, kind of an even mix here actually.
Pretty nice.
Which is kind of cool. And none of the above. So we got 20% people, none of the above. So we're not used to it, but it's not bad actually. It kind of shows that 80% are doing something and then 20% not quite sure yet.
And all of the above, I like to see that.
Yeah.
That means that's real cross-organization.
That's awesome. Okay, so then questions. If you have any questions now, you can throw them in. We'll take a look at it, and we're out of time. But I guess, so this just for the next session. So a couple of things. Think big. What does that mean, Elijah?
Sure. APIs are not just, as we said, little doorways. It's something that you can do, make your whole enterprise run in a completely different way. So I want you to attack your API strategy in a big way, make it central to your future of your company. Engage your community. It's sort of like you can really start to understand what your customers, your partners are looking for, and start to connect with them about what they're looking for. And then scale fast, right? So these API management solutions are really a requisite, especially as you start to grow and grow big, as we talked about, to secure, govern, and monitor that access and really start to get insight out of that works. So that's kind of the takeaway I want you to take for this API company.
Okay, and then last but not least, we're just finishing up the webinar. Yeah. So last but not least, the next seminar is going to be on August 29th. It's going to be on the workflow service. If you have any questions, any comments, feel free to reach out to us. Elijah Martinez, Scott Dillon. Like I say, send us any questions. We'll be happy to get back to you. And thanks for coming out. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Awesome.
How do I guess one question is,